okay, I really don't want to join this other software engineering team because I didn't, like I value my mental health and I hadn't heard good things about that team. So I was like, you know what, let me just go and do this DevOps, right?
That's
But
interesting
it was
because
really
I
interesting.
would have assumed
Exactly.
that for DevOps.
She said she values her mental health and then went ahead to do DevOps. That's crazy.
Like I was very newly introduced to DevOps at the time.
On this episode, we're joined by Ibukun Itimi, who is an observability engineering manager working at one of the biggest fintechs in the world. We talk about her unusual journey into tech and how she navigates her relationship with colleagues as a manager. In addition to her work as an engineer and manager, Ibukun runs a vibrant tech community called Come Tech With Us, which aims to provide resources for career growth and explore different aspects of tech beyond engineering. Our guest shares her passion for helping others navigate their careers and offers valuable insights and advice throughout the episode. All right, enjoy the episode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chuka.
And I'm Emmanuel.
And you're listening to Inside the Techosystem podcast, where we explore Nigeria's tech landscape one conversation at a time. Hello there, ITT fam. You're welcome to another episode of Inside the Techosystem. And it's a bright day today. We're recording in the afternoon, which we rarely do, but we had to move things around. We have a special episode today. We had to, in fact, we had an appointment with the president and we had to just shift it so we can accommodate the president that we have today. And, I'm so glad we're here today. Emmanuel, what's good, man? How's it going?
Good. Same old. Nothing much, nothing new. Please don't talk about my life. Thanks.
I feel like people enjoy hearing about your life, The other day we had a comment saying, I thought the person in the UK, someone thought you lived in the UK. It doesn't tell me. But that's fun. Today we have a superstar, like we call all our guests superstars. And, we're very excited to have her on the show today. Hello, Ibukun. Before I let Ibukun introduce herself, I'd just like to say Ibukun is an observability engineer. Now, before we got started and prepared for this episode, Emmanuel and I tried to rehearse the word observability because it's a lot of syllables. So I'd like to know how, do you always say observability? Because that's a lot, Do you always say observability? You always say that.
No, I actually don't because I just say like I'm an engineering manager. I'm a software engineer. I don't try to explain.
All right, cool. All right, so Ibukun is an engineering manager, a software engineer, an observability engineer, and she's doing great stuff. She has worked with very interesting companies like Paystacks and Wise, and she has a tech community. She runs a tech community where they talk about tech and teach career stuff as well. And she's also a LinkedIn instructor, or should I just say instructor in general? Because I feel like it's not just LinkedIn.
Maybe like right now I only have courses on LinkedIn, but it's coming up.
Okay, but it's coming.
Nice.
It's coming. All right, that's cool.
You heard it first on the show.
Yeah, exactly. We get exclusive content here all the time. People don't give us enough props for that. But yeah, Ibukun, we're so excited to have you here. We'll just let you, introduce yourself further. Take it away.
All right, thanks for having me, guys. My name is Ibukun Itimi. I'm an engineering manager. My team, I lead an observability team, which I have done for a few years now. So I used to work at Paystacks and then I joined Wise, still leading the observability team. And I run a career and tech community. I guess my community and my courses kind of stem out of my interest in sharing my knowledge. I like when people know like things that I know because it just makes things easier for people. So that's kind of why I do those things. And I recently started like doing these mentorship sessions as well. Again, it's all like the same thread of I like to share my experience and my knowledge just to help others, make it maybe a bit easier, than I found it when I was doing it. So yeah, thanks for having me.
That's
You're
nice.
welcome. You're welcome. I can relate to that actually. So,
Yeah.
first question we ask every guest that comes on the show is, how did you get into tech?
Okay. So I think like many like computer science or like engineering students, like when I was younger, I liked to like tinker with things. So like computers, like those old like videotape players and stuff and like DVDs, just to sort of like make them work. So I had a reputation in my family for being the person who will fix those things. And I mean, like the interest sort of dwindled as I kind of grew. So in GS3, like I guess that's like high school or something, when you do your junior exams, like junior
Yeah.
YX.
Yeah.
I unfortunately for myself, I did really well. So I got all A's. And in my mind, I was like, oh, like at this point, I wanted to do art. Actually, I wanted to go to arts class, but then, unfortunately for me, because I got all A's, like everyone was like, you have to be inside. You know how Nigeria is now. Like,
Yeah,
once you
exactly.
just quickly
Yeah.
pass, like you just know that you are going to be a doctor or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, like, I even did an aptitude test, and like all of my interests were arts, but like I just somehow ended up in science class, like much to like my parents' wishes and like the school's wishes at the time. And then I finished, I did my senior secondary school. I did art, I did literature, even though I was like a science student. But then, of course, like at the end, I was like, okay, I'm going to do government and I'm going to do law. And my parents were like, why would you want to do law? You should do science. Da, 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 da. And my dad took me to Babcock and I was like, okay, I'm going to go and find out what I need to do to, to be a law student. So I was going to read my government like textbook. Even though I didn't do government, I was
Wow.
dedicated to this thing. I was like, I am going to be a lawyer. And we got there, but my dad was like complaining. And he was like, I don't know why you want to do this thing. I'm like, what are you doing all day here if you're just going to complain? And then I was just like, okay, you know what? I will just do science and I'll do computer science. And like at that moment, I made the decision and that was it. I did computer science, right? After school, I was running a business and I was like, okay, I'm not going to, work. I'm going to continue running my business. My parents were like, no way, you have to get a job. So I got my first job. In fact, I remember like going for the interview. I had just finished my driving lesson. I was so unprepared. Like, in fact, if I tell you some of the answers that I gave when they asked me, you'll be like, what is this? Like, they're asking me about technologies. Me, I was telling them about Samsung phone and whatever.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I was so unprepared. But like, I don't know how. So they gave me a take home test, and I actually did well on the test. Like, I put a lot of effort into it.
Mm.
So I had like supervisors from my IT, and I called one of them up. I
Okay.
was like, oh, I have this opportunity. Do you think I should take it? And they were
Okay.
like, oh yeah, like you're really smart, so like you should do it. So I went to one of them, like one of their houses, and he actually, walked me through because I needed to use some frameworks that I hadn't, used before. So he was like helping me out and everything, and we made progress. And
Okay.
that's how I got the job. So at least even though I failed, I bombed the like, physical like oral
Yeah.
interview. I actually did I tried, with the take home test. And so that's how I got the job. My very
Wow.
first job a software engineer. Despite all odds, like I shall made it. I made it to tech. And actually, I was in my mind. I was always like, I'll just do this thing for a while. Then I discovered DevOps, and I joined Paystacks. I knew that there was no going back. So I was like,
Wow.
now I'm fully dedicated to this thing.
Do you quietly thank your parents for giving you the push? I don't know,
Yeah,
like,
I do. I do. I
oh
very
wow,
much do actually because
that's
I
interesting.
I don't know if I would have made it as a lawyer because I don't think I would have made it.
Oh man.
So what do you do as an observability engineer? And so of course you started as a normal software engineer, right? And then
Yeah.
you transitioned into DevOps, and then from DevOps you started leading observability. So
Yeah.
can you walk us through what it's like being in that space?
Okay, so I guess like you would have gotten from like my stories, I sort of end up finding myself in all these like random places.
Mm.
And so at my very first year, I worked as a software engineer, and I had the opportunity to either join another software engineering team or join the DevOps team. And at that time, like DevOps was really new. Even in our company, we had just like set up some deployment pipelines. We had set up AWS. But like it was maybe like 2-man team pretty much, and they were just trying to figure out things as they went along. And then at that point, I was like, okay, I really don't want to join this other software engineering team because I didn't, like I value my mental health, and I hadn't heard good things about that team. So I was like, you know what, let me just go and do this DevOps, right?
That's
But
interesting
it was
because
really
I
interesting.
would
Wait,
have assumed that for
exactly.
DevOps.
She said she values her mental health and then went ahead to do DevOps.
Fair enough.
That's crazy.
The thing is, like I was very newly introduced to DevOps at the time,
Okay.
and it wasn't like
So
then.
someone lied to you.
Yeah. And it wasn't even as popular, like generally. Now, like
Yeah.
they're very fully formed, like DevOps teams, SRE teams. It
Yeah.
wasn't exactly
Yeah.
that way before. And so I joined the DevOps team. Of course, I was new. I was just like learning, just pretty much like I would sit down by the engineer's desk and just like see what he was doing. And pretty much he would say, just like run this bunch of commands on the command line. I will bring up like instances. I'm like, what is all this magic? So I did that for a while, and then I saw the Paystack role, applied for that. That was more of a challenge for me because obviously Paystack was a bigger company, even though like the company I worked at first, they had like different products, but Paystack very like product driven, and you sort of had to be in line with, the mission of the company, which wasn't difficult anyway, because, Paystack is a great place to work. And so like with DevOps, of course, we were doing cloud, we were doing like deployments and pretty much like managing that. And for me, I was just like going along with it. It was like, if there's anything that, we need to figure out, I would sort of be the person to say, oh yeah, like I'll take a stab at it. I just liked to do like, I don't know, different things. And then of course, like when we started talking about observability, actually from my previous place, we had a client who had started asking us about incident response. And so when I joined Paystack, I was like, oh, okay, incident response, we didn't have like a mature framework at the time. So I started like, researching. I was like, oh, you know what, we're just going to pay for this thing. It's called PagerDuty. We can all go on call and everything. And started drawing up like, okay, this is the responsibility matrix. I have no idea why I did all these things then, but like, I was like, okay, engineers, congratulations. You are now onboarded to New Relic and PagerDuty. You have to go on call. And because I was doing that and sort of like, pushing that, it now sort of became, oh, if we're looking for anything, monitoring and everything, you would ask Ibukun. And so at some point, we sort of decided to do a migration to a different like observability tool, which was Datadog. And all of that like research and, what tooling should we use, I was sort of leading that. I had a manager at the time who was very supportive of all my dreams. And so when
That's very important, by the way.
Yeah.
Very. Yeah.
And so when I say, oh, hey, Laknan, I want us to try out this thing, he'll be like, yeah, whatever, like go and do a POC and come back. So that really gave me the like chance to really explore. And then I think I did that for a while. I was still part of the DevOps team. So I was picking up like different tasks, but a lot of like the things like observability wise, I would sort of like suggest that, let's do this and put it on the roadmap. And I would sort of be the one to pick it up. But then team was growing. I actually went on maternity leave. So I handed over to someone else to say, oh, I've started this like Datadog migration. This is where I am. And this is where you should, sort of continue on. And it was sort of at the feedback stage. And I came back and he was doing really well. His name is Okwe Onikute. He was doing really well. Yeah.
Oh.
Okwe was my was my guy.
I know that guy. He's quite, I know him.
Yeah. So, he was doing really well. So at that point, they were like, okay, you guys, congratulations. You now have a team.
Wow.
The observability team. And, we were working together. The team grew, to maybe about 4 or 5 engineers before I left. And then I went on, to WISE. So I've been at WISE for a year now. I guess my day-to-day really as an observability engineer is just making sure that the infrastructure that allows people to like monitor their systems, know what's happening within their systems is up and running. At WISE, my role changed a bit. So I don't do like technical work as much as I used to at Paystack, which I really missed at first, but I think I've adjusted. So I do pick up like technical tasks, like much to my teammates surprised. I'm like, oh yeah, just assign this thing to me, and I'll do it.
Nice.
I'll just and create one new thing for them. I'm like, okay, congrats guys, like I've created this new thing. This is what we're using now.
Nice.
And but I think right now my focus, my main focus is really on like building my team, making sure that my team is working well, the systems that we have work to make sure that like people, I guess our customers who are other engineers are, satisfied with the tooling that we have. So we look
Hmm,
at it as a product and we try to like support that observability wise.
That's a
that's
lot.
cool.
And and from what I know, you're supporting basically the entire company. So this I don't know, maybe this sub product cannot be using Datadog while the other one is using Sentry or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So how does
Yeah.
it work
Centralized.
in your mind in terms of context switching? Because then you kind of have to have some context of what everyone in the whole company is doing. So how do
Mm.
you manage that?
I guess it's been different like from company to company. So in my first company, I had an idea because I had worked there for a while. So I worked there for almost 4 years. So obviously, like towards the end of the 4 years, when I started like picking up observability stuff, I had an idea of like, the different teams, their different products. And actually, my interest in observability started then as well because I started like building dashboards for the teams and stuff. And we already had the tooling in place. I think one of the previous engineers had sort of set it up, but we weren't using it properly. So I was just like, okay, I kind of start from like, this is the tooling that we have and, understood what it could do and, started talking to the engineers about it. So again, I was there for 4 years. So I had like a fair understanding of, what was going on. I think same thing applies to Paystack as well. I was there for almost 4 years. And I knew
So
I had a
you
good
do like
idea.
presidential terms and stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I had like a good idea of, what the teams were working on, how to support them. We would join like their review meetings as well. So like towards the end, I had this like rotation with my team where they were supporting like a group of teams and they would join the meetings, where those teams are reviewing their, dashboards, incidents, and you sort of get an understanding of, okay, this is what endpoints powers transactions, this is the endpoint that powers,
Hmm,
something else. So it was sort of like, and then again, like one of the things that we wanted to do was to support like product observability, not just like engineering observability. So, in the sense that you understand like your engineering metrics, but of course, like you're powering a product, right? So, understanding like how is the product performing from the user's perspective, like we really wanted to understand. So, like how is, for example, like Paystack transactions or like Wise transactions working instead of just like how our like Kubernetes pods running, that sort of thing. And so because of that, like we spoke to like the leads, the team to sort of support all of that. Again, like because Wise is a much bigger company, we have maybe about 700 teams. It's much more
Whoa,
difficult to do.
700
700
teams.
engineers rather. So
no,
100.
I think it's I think it has to happen because I'm here thinking if anything happens to my money, Ibuku, I'm coming to meet you like directly
I know, right? Because I use
because
Wise like regularly.
we all use Wise, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, so we have about 700 engineers. So it's been more difficult to like speak to each one of them. But I think sort of joining the team, my first focus was just getting the team to like a healthier state because it was a smaller team. Obviously, imagine like, all of the observability, like the observability that powers all of Wise, like it's massive infrastructure to manage. And I think for the
Yeah.
past year, my goal has just been like, how do I get the team productive? How do I make sure that our infrastructure is in a stable state? And I think now what we've sort of done in terms of starting to reach out to teams is we now have a PM. Actually, we got a PM last quarter, and he's been working with me, working with the team to do like user interviews to sort of understand what each team or like each, I guess, well, each category of our users use our
Yeah.
products for.
Hmm.
So I think that's sort of the start of like the conversation to really understand like what each team does and how we can support them. But I guess like in terms of like the scaling of observability, like because obviously as Wise we use select like languages and frameworks, like a lot of things are written in Java. You can sort of standardize how you collect metrics, how you collect logs, how you collect traces across,
Yeah.
especially when you're working with like specific sets of services. So we have another team, which is the application engineering team. and they write libraries and just make sure that, like, if you use those libraries, you have like your
Yeah.
default metrics logs. You send your traces. So in that sense, like, we have like a good system for like scaling, as the company is growing.
So how much code do you write like now compared
Now,
to when you were doing just DevOps?
yeah, in the past year, honestly, I've written almost, well, I mean, honestly, like almost non-existent. I think I worked on a project because I think, what I was saying is like one of the ways we think about observability is like we have a product, that we're offering to people, and one of the
Yeah.
things I wanted to do was to measure like our availability and all of that. So just like thinking about, what metrics we should be collecting to make sure that, for metrics we're up, for logs we're up, that sort of thing. And so
Yeah.
I started working on that project, and I needed to put that in code. And then I think I did a few other projects here and there, just like pair programming with my team, because I like to sort of get close to what they're doing, just have a good
Close to
understanding.
the metal.
Yeah,
Nice.
so that
Mm.
I'm not far from, those conversations that they're having. So yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of my focus, in the past year has just been like making sure that the team is working and
Yeah.
that like things don't die.
That's the
Yeah,
manager's
fair,
job.
fair enough, fair enough, fair enough.
Exactly. So,
I
but
have
But
I
like,
have a I have a personal problem that I think you should be able to solve. Okay. So I work in a company, right?
yeah,
Let's hypothetically I work in a company and I
he
write some
works in the
code
company.
and
Remove the hypothetical.
hypothetically, no. Let's be hypothetical here. So I write some software and I'm not responsible for the observability part. So like metrics collection and stuff like that.
yeah.
And I have some problems. Let's say something goes wrong in production and I want to be able to debug in production. Is that also part of something you solve as an observability team, allowing people to kind of figure out problems in production?
Yeah, I think that's like the essence of observability, right? Like making sure that you're sort of collecting signals and using those signals correctly. Um, Technically, I do believe that there's a lot of responsibility on the engineers. For an observability team, of course, we're responsible for making sure that the infrastructure that would, process your data is there. We're responsible for making sure that it's available, it's scalable. We're responsible for the product, but determining what metrics to send, what logs to send is really up to the person who understands the code the most. And then of course we can, give you guidance on like best practices, how to use the tooling that we provide. But again, all of that, sort of just sums up to, if something is wrong in production, before things go wrong in production, you have an idea, because we have, stuff available for you to, diagnose and debug and understand your system.
Hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Makes sense.
I'm curious, would you say, because you just mentioned that you don't write as much code as you used to, and you
Yeah,
also mentioned that you kind of miss it.
yeah.
But would you say, engineering management is about, managing engineers and all of that? Would you say that's a more tedious task than, just talking to the computer?
It depends. It depends. So
Okay.
computers are predictable most of the time. It's kind
Exactly.
of fun to, just like sit down with your code, figure it out, and then you have this like satisfaction of, I figured this thing out, it works in production, and you can sort of
Mm-hmm.
like move on with your life, right? People, not so much.
At all.
So technically, you are responsible for these people. You sort of have to understand, not just how they show up at work, but like with my team, I have conversations. I know, what their wives are doing. I know how their kids are doing. It's
Wow.
my personal choice to sort of have those conversations with them, but it sort
Mm.
of helps me understand how they are showing up at work. So like
Okay.
if someone, for example, if their child is not sleeping well and they are, struggling at work, like it's sort of my job to say, take time off and, refresh and, come back. So I have those conversations with my team, and it means that sometimes like even making tough decisions is difficult, because you understand like what this person's family is, you understand their
Mm.
situation. And sometimes I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, maybe I should just not have these conversations with people, so that if I have to make a difficult decision,
You can
I'm
just
just like,
close your eyes.
yeah, but like I know myself, and I don't think I can run a team like that. I like to have
Mm.
these conversations with people, just because generally, like I think obviously like a lot of things that happen personally for you affect how you show up at work. So it's not something that
Sure.
you can put to the side. On the other hand, I do enjoy having these conversations, making these connections as well. So as difficult as it is, I like it. I like the different aspects of thinking of what the team should be doing, putting systems in place. I'm a very like my manager says like I'm a very methodical person. Like I like things to be done in a very certain way,
Mm,
just because like it helps my sanity and my peace of mind. But I find that it has helped me grow teams that are productive and teams that perform well. And so yeah, I miss writing code, to be honest. And I had a project. I worked on a course recently. Actually, I just wrapped it up last
okay.
month, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to use like very different, technologies that I've used before. And it was frustrating. I was like, okay, you know what, maybe it's not so bad. I'm not anymore. But no, I've enjoyed very thoroughly like all of my time, writing code. I think I just have a different focus now, but
Mm,
I guess it sort of would shift, depending on the company that you're in. Because when I joined Wise, my manager was like, you can decide to be a technical manager, or you can decide to be like a people or products, manager. And
okay.
initially, I was like, oh, I'm going to be, technical, and I'm going to, dive into the code. But I realized that it was difficult to do that and really focus on like the team's productivity. Because like the thing is,
Mm,
once I'm writing code, like that's where my mind is. Every other person are focusing about you, which doesn't
yeah.
make for like a good engineering manager, because you have to
Yeah.
manage what everyone is doing. So
Yeah.
that was sort of like where I now found the balance of like, okay, you know what, I just need to like focus on people now. And of course, as the team grows, as the team becomes more stable, there's more time. Like I find that there are pockets of time where, I can focus on something technical, or I can pair with one of the
Mm-hmm.
engineers on my team. So I try to make use of, those times where I have a bit of downtime and there's not much, team, stuff going on. So yeah, it's a mix. I actually can't choose.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So from a small startup of let's say 5 people, and you have let's say 2 engineers, and then everyone else is maybe doing business or finance or something. And then the company grows, they expand, plenty users, they raise money, and then they expand to let's say 50 people. And then afterwards, they grow, they expand, they start creating new sub products, and then they grow to let's say 200, and then like that, they get to 1,000. How would you describe the changes that they will need to make in terms of first of all, it starts as maybe CI/CD, just ordinary CI/CD. So if something
Yeah.
breaks, somebody has to SSH into the server and fix something. And then, of course, they cannot do that when it's 1,000 people, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm,
what are the different points in time when a company has to revamp like their platform to make it more scalable?
That's an interesting question. All right. I mean, like two people. I would say, to be fair, when I think of two people, of course, even if you want to say like you want to do deployments, I mean, it's easier for like two engineers to just like I don't know, come into a GitHub repo, and they're just like as you said, like SSH, and put things and deploy from there. But I think as much as you can, like if you have the bandwidth to sort of start small, start open source, start free, is what I would say. So if you can whip up like a very like low maintenance, pipeline that deploys, that's good, because obviously you're sort of setting yourself up for success as you grow, right? As the team grows, obviously, let's say you have like, let's even say like 15 to 20 engineers. If you can dedicate like one or two of them to look after the platform, that would be great, because obviously the more you grow, the more complexity you have. I think what I would say really is like in starting out, like choose like software tools, infrastructure that you can grow with. Obviously, the commonly used things, the things that most of these big companies are using, where you can start with the free versions, or you can even go open source. I my first like major introduction to open source was at Wise, and I realized that what, even if you don't have like the full suite of like tools like Datadog or New Relic, sort of like starting at that point, and like those tools are robust enough for you to quickly, maybe not quickly, but like to set up and to maintain. And even like with some of the like Grafana Cloud, you have your free version, right? So you can probably start using that at whatever level you're at. And then obviously as you grow, continue to like consider like the cost, continue to consider like your engineering hours. I think where I would say you should sort of be looking out for and deciding when to scale is if you're using something that's open source, is it now becoming too much of a burden for your team to maintain where like their productive hours, they're just, sort of using it to maintain something and keeping it, up and running. If you get to that point, you might want to consider paying for a tool, but of course you want to make sure that it's a tool that can scale with your growth as well. So when you, for example, like consider tools like Datadog, New Relic, obviously as your data grows your cost is growing exponentially, but when you consider things like open source, your storage is in S3, which doesn't grow as much, the cost doesn't grow as much, as your data
Yeah.
is growing. So you're not going to see like 10x, all of a sudden, or like 5x all of a sudden. So I would say really like the balance is sort of thinking about how much is it costing you in terms of like engineering hours versus like dollar cost. Like, keep things as open source as possible until it
So
no
by
longer
open
makes
source, you mean
sense.
free?
Yeah, free. Yeah,
Okay.
free actually, because obviously, like as a startup, you're just trying to like put money together. It doesn't make
Mm.
sense to go and sink all of that money in your infrastructure costs, like because there are other parts of the business that you want to support. And what I find really is that obviously, as data grows, like those questions will come. Observability is one of the places where people are like, "Why are people spending this money?" I'm like, "Is your data?"
And it's a lot of money,
Yeah,
really.
I
Like
come
it's
to
a
I saw
lot
the
of
budget
money.
for my previous company and I was like, okay,
yeah.
these guys are
So
spending a
and
lot.
They're spending money. They're spending your salary on infrastructure.
exactly. But I mean, like it has its benefits, right? Because obviously, when you think about the money that you're spending, imagine if you had a downtime and you lost like a bunch of customers or you lost money. Like there's also a trade-off, or there's something that you're sort of getting when you have the visibility into your system, right? But I would definitely say just like keep an eye on your engineering costs in terms of like how much your team is spending on like maintenance, how much time they spend on maintenance and just keeping things up. If you're getting to the point where like the teams are not able to be productive for like a long time because it's all about like, fighting fires and incidents and stuff, it might be time to start considering something that scales, or even maybe just re-architecture to make sure that, it's either you're paying for that scale or your infrastructure actually can scale to match your growth. I think there's no like magic number of like, when you should pay for things or when you should grow. But I always say like if you're going to choose your tooling, you need to sort of be sure that this, tool has like a track record of keeping up with the industry. So like if you're using a specific vendor, making sure that, when observability is moving in one direction, they are also moving in that direction, because you're going to get the best of what is available in the industry. So you don't feel like, oh, everyone is doing AI now and there are obvious benefits of AI, but the vendor that I'm locked into, I mean, avoid vendor locking, but like the vendor
Mm.
that I'm locked into or the vendor that I'm using, is not moving in that direction. So I now have to do like a whole migration. You want to avoid that. And I think there's enough information out there now for you to, actually do proper research, if possible, like do POCs, reach out to like these companies. They're very like keen to get customers. So you'll be surprised how much like every time we use something new, I just go to them. I'm like, oh, we want to try out this thing. And even when we were paid customers in Paystack, like they would still give us certain tools that they were just releasing for free. Because I would go to our manager, maybe like I think our technical manager, or can't remember what account manager at the
Mm.
time, and be like, oh, we want to try out this new thing that you guys have released, but we're not ready to pay for it. Would you give us like 1 to 2 months free? To sort of test it out. And of course, like they'll give us because they want our
I
money.
like
So
I like the fact that everybody they hustle, regardless of industry. I love
exactly,
that.
exactly. Like no matter the size, it's the small money they are collecting from here and there,
Yep.
that is contributing to their revenue. So, feel free to like reach out to their account managers, speak to them, or like reach out to the community of the tooling that you're using. Like Grafana's support is pretty good. If you join their Slack, it's open source, but you would get answers. I know my team is usually in there, like engaging with them whenever we have issues. So I guess in a nutshell, like look out for the balance between your engineering and dollar costs, and ensure that, as you sort of start on your journey, whatever tooling you're deciding, or like infrastructure you're deciding to choose, you sort of have a good understanding of like what the ecosystem of that, infrastructure is like what is their support like, how do they sort of evolve, with the industry, and also how do their costs, scale, or how would the cost scale as you grow, to sort of make your decision.
Hmm. Fair enough. Fair enough. That makes sense. So would you say um it's necessary for a small startup to already start considering having someone that will help them with that, like an observability engineer on the team? Because we had the cybersecurity episode one time, and the professional that was brought on said, it's always funny when people think of cybersecurity afterwards, you
Yeah.
know, and not when they are starting out the product or the company. So would you advise, startups that just get decided, look, what you're building, you're going to need someone to help you manage this thing down the line,
Yeah.
right? I'm pretty sure Wise wasn't as big as it is now. It started from
Yeah.
maybe 2 or 3 users, right? So would you advise, smaller startups to start thinking of that early on?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because you sort of don't want to be caught unawares like when your products, grows. So one of my I guess my colleagues and my friend, like Femi, is the founder of Child Deck. And very early on, like when they started, he immediately was like, "Oh, Ibukun, we want to get this visibility into this. How do we do this? How do we do that?" And I like that thinking, because obviously, like, you're not there's no set time that your company will blow, in code, right? So
Can
it's
be
not
like
like
Ashake.
exactly
Yeah.
like overnight everybody just blows. And then of course, like, if you experience that sort of growth where, all of a sudden, like, people know your products, people are using your product, you are going to be experiencing like issues that you do not anticipate, issues that you don't understand. So if you already
Hmm.
have started like thinking about it, and you already have tools in place, like, it doesn't have to be the most robust thing. Like, as I said, like, start free. And free doesn't necessarily mean that, you're not getting the best of, what is out there. Like, Wise, we use open source Grafana, and
Hmm.
we use like open source, pretty much almost anything, everything. We don't really pay any vendors, so at our scale,
Wow.
still.
Wow. So what are you doing with all our money?
I mean, like, open source doesn't necessarily mean like free, or doesn't necessarily
True.
mean cheap, because obviously we have a lot of data and we process a lot of data, so we have to
Okay.
pay for
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely from the start, like, if you can, you don't have to have dedicated engineers, is what I would say. You literally can just have, your team instruments what they have, set up something small, start using it. As your team grows, you can say, oh, let me
Hmm.
dedicate like one person to it, let me dedicate a team. Like, Paystack, we didn't start out with observability. We were DevOps. It was myself and I think one other person and our manager. So we were three. And as at the time when I left, we literally had grown from a team of like three when I joined to probably a team of over maybe almost 20 people.
Wow.
And it was like from DevOps, one DevOps team, we had security, we had application security, we had observability, we still had DevOps. So we had all of those factions sort of grow from the DevOps team. But as you see, like, we made those decisions, or like those decisions were made based on
Very
the
early.
demand at the time. But
Yeah.
the foundations were always there. When I joined Paystack, there was a new relic. We didn't have like, pager duty, people wearing on call, but there was a foundation for us to sort of grow from. And obviously, like, as the team grew, we were able to now sort of say, oh, like, this person, you can go and, be in your own observability world and not have to worry about Kubernetes,
Yeah.
sort of divide the team into like more concentrated teams, like solving specific problems.
Okay. So you talk to people listening to this now that they're thinking, oh, you know what, I want to do something like that, right? So I want you to walk us through your journey going from software to DevOps to
Observability.
observability. Like, just what was it like transitioning, and also what's the difference? You said SRE. You didn't say SRE, but
Yeah,
initially when I thought of observability, that's what I thought of,
sort of, yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then you also talked about DevOps and observability itself. So what's the difference between these three things, and what was it like transitioning? You also mentioned that you thought DevOps was where it was at, and a man and I immediately disagreed, right? So how did your mindset change, after a while joining that team?
Yeah. Um, I feel like, okay, so I mean, when I transitioned to DevOps, as I said, like I just finished school, like maybe I had just done my NYSC, so it just a year out of school, I was still fresh. I had lots of ginger, right? So
Mm,
I struggled in the beginning, but it wasn't because of the work. It was just because of the team that I was in and what I was exposed to at the time. So I joined at the point where I think we were doing some migration. So there was with migrations, there's a lot of like random, like all this tracking that you have to do. Like, okay, have we moved
yeah,
this service? Have we moved this
yeah,
thing? And that was sort of my responsibility, and I hated it so much. But I think over time, I started trying to do things myself from scratch. I think that was sort of where things turned for me. And that was maybe about probably like a year or two into my career. Because like before then, there were a number of engineers on the team, but then they started to leave, and it was like, okay, Ibukun is the oldest person on the team, so um, you have to stand up and do the work, right?
yeah,
But even
yeah.
before then, I had been doing it, but I was sort of just like managing what people, had built because obviously we already had a few things in place. But I think for me, like my career started to turn when I was like, okay, I'm just going to like go and do this thing from scratch. I'm going to learn how to build the CI/CD pipeline from scratch. And I think at some point I met someone who said, "Oh, Ibuku, I need you to do this like AWS networking thing," and so literally from scratch, I had like an AWS account, built the networking for that, built the CI/CD pipelines, and helped the guy deploy his service. And at that point,
Mm.
I was like, this is the thing I'm going to do for the rest of my life
It felt
because
so good, didn't it?
felt so good. I was like, wait, this is so interesting.
Yeah.
And interestingly, like shortly after is when I had like the Paystack, interview. And they were like, "Oh, come and build this VPC." I was like, "Is it this thing? I can do it." I'm just
Too easy.
and so I think when I started to like really, go to, I need to understand this thing myself from scratch
Mm,
and understand like all the different dimensions of it is sort of when, my interest peaked. And so for me, like the initial transition to DevOps was like, okay, I'm just going to go and see how this thing works. But I think as I, started to fiddle around, it became more interesting for me. When I got to Paystack, I got the chance to do more of that. And it was like, literally anything. Like honestly, I don't even know why I used to volunteer for these things, but I'll just be like, "Oh, no, 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 yeah, sure, I'll try it. I can do it." And then when I go, I'll be like, "Who sends me a message?" Right. For me, it has been a lot of like experimentation, a lot of like reading. If I want to do something, I'll go, and I remember we had a new engineer join our team, and up until then, I understood Terraform, but I think the way he wanted to do it was a bit different. And I just went and like had like this whole course, and I completed the course, and I was like, okay, now I'm ready to Terraform. And I mean, I don't have shame. Like if I don't understand something, you must explain it to me. If you like be frustrated, that's your business. That you must explain it to me. So like whenever I had issues, I would sort of sit with him and be like, okay, how do I do this from there? And like once you sort of show me the first time, after I've sort of done my own learning, I can go on and figure things out. So that's sort of my blueprint. I just volunteer for things that I've never done before.
mm,
I figure it
mm.
out, and I continue with it. And it was the same for observability as well. I remember that there were times when we would have like conversations. I remember I'm like, I don't even know what these people are talking about. Anyway, Sha, when they say it's time to do data dog, you see me there.
I like
I was
that. I like that.
like, okay, oh, this thing, let me go and figure it out and come back. And I think for me, what has really supported my journey has just been I had like different people at different points who I guess supported my curiosity, especially at Paystack. I think for me that gave me the courage to just like try things. And even when it didn't go well, I knew that I had a manager who would, have my back. And I find that I'm getting the same thing at Wise as well. It took a while for me to, adjust, but I think eventually I sort of knew that as long as I'm transparent with my manager, as long as he knows what I'm trying to, he didn't always agree with my way of doing things, but I was just like, okay, yeah, sure. I've heard you. Thanks for, letting me know your feedback. But I think as I've grown in my career, it's sort of now, especially this year, sort of being confident in some of the decisions that I make. And knowing that, okay, if I've made this thing work before, the chance is that, I can make it work again. And so I just I just dedicate my time to like doing things that I know will challenge me and make me grow. So I think if you want to find yourself in this space, I would say there's a lot of like, information out there. There are lots of resources. I try to create courses that I think would be easy for like anyone to sort of jump on and understand. Because of course, like a lot of these things are very technical, but then there are ways that you can sort of explain to people where it's easy for them to like pick it up. So look for resources like that where it's easy for you to understand and you don't have to like understand everything at once. Like I remember that I saw this article from someone at Stripe, and when I read the article the first time, I didn't understand it. I read the article for years, and every time I realized that, oh, this is what this guy was talking about, I'll go back and read the article. I'm like, now I
Yeah.
understand line one to 10. Very good for me. And next time I go, because I learn, when I practice, right? So even though I didn't understand what I was reading at the time, I just found ways to sort of, try my hands out at things, and then I would go back. And even till now, with the course I just mentioned, it was me sort of battling with like open telemetry and Grafana and, everything. And I was like, you know what, it's a chance for me to really understand how the open source system works, because obviously up until then I had used like vendors, we had used New Relic, we had used Datadog. But when I realized that, okay, I'm going to be making a course, about this, I might as well use something that I haven't used before and use it as a chance to learn. So I find those opportunities for myself. So yeah, you just have to be curious about learning. You have
Yeah.
to, keep like coding, DevOps, SRE. It's all like practical. So you have to really try your hands out at it. Your hands out at it. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Anyways. And then,
We'll allow it, no matter what. We'll allow it.
and then I guess for the difference, like there are different variations of the same thing in a sense, because I guess it sort of started out as DevOps. So DevOps was literally everything, like cloud, deployments, observability, anything you can think of after an engineer commits his code to GitHub was pretty much DevOps. Um, and then it started breaking out into different like teams. So like those like cloud, is a whole thing on its own. CI/CD is a
Mhm.
whole thing on its own.
Okay.
Observability is a whole thing on its own, and everything sort of makes up the platform, right? It's basically the platform where your services are deployed. So when you hear of platform engineers, they're usually engineers who work in either of any of these spaces. And then within like platform, you can have like niches. SRE is again sort of like is also a discipline as well. And SRE was sort of encapsulate things about like availability, observability, incident response, incident management, those sort of things. But I think different companies can sort of define it as they want. It's just
Okay.
if you're applying for roles like that, you just sort of need to be aware of what this company describes as a platform engineer. Do they want an engineer who does everything, or do they want you to come and join a team within their platform engineering team? So at Wise, for example, we have platform engineering tribe. Well, within that tribe, we have a CI team, we have a CD team, we have database, and then like data team. We have observability, we have SRE. So again, like we define those things, differently, but a lot of times it would all be related to like, the platform, which is where which is how you deploy your services, where you deploy your services, and how you sort of maintain them from there.
So is SRE the umbrella term for everything, or platform engineering?
I would say platform engineering is the umbrella term for everything. SRE is
Okay.
Okay.
sort of like a subset of platform, yeah.
I've never seen a job ad for a platform engineer, but I've seen for SRE, and I think at Netflix they pay them close to $400,000 or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I'm just going to announce here that I'm changing my career decisions.
no, the headache that comes with now. So as long as you can chest
Oh
it,
my
no
God. I think the first time I saw a job ad for an SRE engineer at Netflix, I was like, what is this? What is this salary? I was
no.
blown away, trust me.
But the thing is, you ask yourself also like, what are the responsibilities?
Yeah.
You are trading your blood for money. All right. So Ibuka, I'm so glad that you mentioned how people can get started. We love sharing resources on this show. So we're going to probably get resources from you and also link your courses on LinkedIn in the show
Yeah,
notes. And
yeah,
I also agree with the point that you made about you learning new tools, right? Just because you wanted to start teaching something, because I myself, I create content, right? And I know how it is. So yeah, I'm just going to shape this conversation to come tech with us. So can you talk to us about come tech with us? I think it's the newest community in town, and it's really vibing. Everybody wants to be a part of it. It's an exclusive membership card. So talk to us about come tech with us, your community.
Yeah. So I guess like I've as I said, like I've always sort of known that whenever I want to, or whenever I learn something, when you want to share about it, talk about it. So I've had like blogs, I've run like random events and just things like that. And then I think when I joined Wise earlier in the year, I sort of had this philosophy, and I'm a Christian. So there's a verse that sort of says like your suffering is, for the, like, God comforts you so that you can comfort others. And I realized that I was going through like a difficult time, sort of adjusting. But in my mind, I knew that all of these experiences are for the benefit of other people. Like, of course, like I get my benefits from it. Like, I have a good job. I like my house. I earn good money. All of that, that's for me. But then it's like beyond that, like what else, And I was dealing with imposter syndrome, like very, very high, very, very critical imposter syndrome. Because of course, like I've come from a different country, different culture, different team, different infrastructure, and I'm trying to like settle in here. But even through all of that, at the back of my mind, I was like, someone somewhere is like looking at me like, how did this girl even do this thing? And so I knew that like, even though I felt like there were things I didn't know, I knew that like, if I know like A to F, at least I can teach people ATM. The
Yeah.
remaining, I will be figuring it out as I go, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I also sort of had like an interest in content creation, and I was like, okay, I'll start creating content. I think for me, like content creation was always like share about what you know, like your experiences. And then I had like a couple of posts about my career, and people really responded well to it. So I was like, you know what, if I want to like make this a thing, but obviously I have like on my personal page, so I'm not going to like ask people from LinkedIn to come and see my family history. And so I was like, okay, and literally like in one weekend, I was like, okay, this is now a thing, and it is a community.
Nice.
So because I had already had the interest, I'd already been doing the groundwork, like creating content, creating courses. I always knew like what the types of things I wanted to share. I knew that I think my first focus was I'm a manager, and I am very passionate and interested in like management, because I care about the people that I work with. And I know that that's not always the case. Especially in tech, because a lot of technical people get to be managers, but not every, very good technical person needs to be managing people. Not because like they probably can't, but because maybe it's not their strong suit. Like people is a different like kettle of fish from, infrastructure. And I wanted to sort of be that resource where like, regardless of how good or crappy your manager is, you get information on how to grow your career, how to like ask for the right things. And so that was sort of the drive behind like, come tech with us. And I think as a whole, it's pretty much just like a community that I think I wanted to explore like the human side of tech, like the side where there are people who are working, they have like concerns, they don't know how to like move from point A to, F, at least up to where I am, and just sort of
Yeah.
provide resources that enables people to do that. And, explore different sides of tech, let people know that, yeah, like, there are a bunch of engineers, but the truth is like there's so many other careers that you can be exploring in tech as well. And even like when you get into tech, how do you then start to like grow your career? How do you find resources? How do you find like mentors, coaches? How do you manage like performance management? Like these are things that I know that sometimes is difficult because they don't teach you all these things in school. You sort of just
Yeah,
are thrown
exactly.
the
Yeah.
career world, and then you're like, oh, now I have
As
to
I'm
ask
even
for
listening, I
this.
feel like I need to I need
Sorry.
to learn
Look
those
at this
things.
one. Look at this one.
Yeah, because I mean, like those things, like very early on in my career, I remember like people would sort of ask, threaten to leave the company so that they could get raises, and I'm like, I mean, I get it, but like I knew that that was not something that I wanted to do, right? So I sort of had to like figure out, like, okay, how do I grow, but not like threaten somebody else? Like me, if I resign, just know that I've resigned. I'm not trying to get more money. I'm actually going. So, like
Mm,
all those types of things, nobody taught me. I just was like figuring it out as I went. And I was like, okay, you know what, maybe there's room to sort of bring this information to people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's sort of what Come Tech with Us is about.
Yeah.
That's
So
inspiring.
is the community
Yeah.
open to every single person, like regardless of location or so?
Yes.
Most meetings are virtual. Yeah, I'm guessing.
Yes. So we, of course, like we share content regularly on Instagram. We share on LinkedIn as well. So we have a Come Tech with Us page. But we also do like monthly virtual workshops. So the first one was on LinkedIn and using LinkedIn to find opportunities. We had one on Friday, just a few days ago, on like transitioning your career. We have another one coming up next month as well. So all of those things are available, not right now via Instagram, but obviously as the community grows, it might change. But as long as you follow us on Instagram, Come Tech with Us, you would be able to sort of follow, our journey and sort of where we are, sharing this content. But primarily now, Instagram, LinkedIn. I have TikTok now. I have TikTok.
That's
And
cool.
then,
What kind of
That's
content
cool.
will be on TikTok?
sorry?
What kind of content will be on TikTok?
Oh no, so it's still like the short form content of like,
Okay.
Yeah.
basically the things that we share, like how to grow your career. Pretty much, I'm definitely not dancing on TikTok.
If you don't want to dance, I'll dance for you. I don't mind.
I don't mind. So but it was just like an attempt to sort of reach as many people as possible. And
I love
obviously like
that. Yeah.
different people use different platforms. So just like having that information there.
Yeah.
The workshops are like an hour long. So I also have them on YouTube as well, just so people can catch up, even after the workshops are done. So those are available on the internet as well.
What form of content do you prefer between writing and making videos?
You know what? I haven't written in a while. So I think
Okay.
making videos, I haven't written in a while. Like at the back of my mind, I always have like an article or two that I should write, but I don't.
You
I
leave
think
it in drafts.
funny enough, like I don't even write drafts. Like when I'm committed, I'll just like write everything in my mind and then revise. But like
Fair.
I think sort of in like pictures and like videos. So when something comes to me, I usually can think of, okay, this is how it would sound or this is how it would look. So I think I enjoy that form of like creation.
That means you must have really enjoyed, doing the LinkedIn thing, the instructor thing on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, I did.
Did they reach out to you, or is that something you apply for?
Okay, so my husband is an engineer as well. He works at Microsoft, and he had an
nice.
engineer who was working with LinkedIn on a course, and he was like, "Oh, Ibukun, I heard of this thing. I think you like all these types of things, so maybe maybe you should apply or something." And I think shortly after, I came across a post on LinkedIn where someone was asking for DevOps, or they were asking for creators for like GitHub and everything, and then I was just like, me, I'm here. I do DevOps. I can create stuff. As usual, in my usual fashion, just volunteering for things. And then they reached out to me, and we sort of, carried on conversation from there. And my content manager has a sneaky way of sort of just being like, "Ibukun, I remember you said you were interested in this course. Like, don't you think you should come back and record it?" So that's how I recorded. Like now, my third course. Like 3 years in a row, I've had a course.
Oh wow!
I've been recording.
to back.
Yeah, and like this time when I finished in October, I told my producer that I'm not recording any course this year. If they ask me, tell them I'm available. But like I have a meeting with her next week to discuss my next course, so we'll see how
That's
it goes.
nice, but I'm guessing the feedback is great. That's why they keep bringing you back.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Like, I think the courses have gotten like progressively better, which I quite like. I'm really excited about the last one I just did as well. Not just because it's something. So I revised a course that's on LinkedIn at the moment. So obviously, like it's more updated. But
okay.
also because it's something that like it took me a lot to create the course. It was a really good learning experience for me. And so as usual, like once I learn something, I try to make it simpler for other people.
Exactly.
So that makes me really excited to see it eventually.
Yeah.
Nice. Have you considered doing on Old School Africa?
No,
That's
I
true.
haven't.
Hack Sultan, reach out to us. I'm telling you now. We'll reach out to Ibukun on your behalf.
I haven't. I actually recently I just followed him. I didn't know before that he was the owner of All School Africa. So I reached out to him recently. I'm still waiting for him to reply me, but of course I reached out
Wow. Us too. We're still waiting for him to reply. Oh. we reached out to him last year. Okay. Okay.
I was
Because it will never blow.
I was trying to get, because again, on Comtech with us, it's sort of like looking for resources for people. And I think we recently put out something on, getting internships and communities that you can join. And I was looking for, we don't have like a good like internship and graduate like, culture in Nigeria. And so I was looking for people who were already doing something in that space, and someone, sort of just mentioned that. But yeah, I'm looking for people who are, doing that, because of course a lot of people are learning, they're self-learning, or they just finished from school, and it's sort of difficult to get that leg up. Meanwhile, obviously in developed countries, you have graduate programs, you have internship programs. So you have people who have literally worked for like big tech before they've even finished school, or they know, they can always go back there, and that gives them a better opportunity. So like it's things like that that we try to bring to the community, so that people, even if you didn't know before, now you can take advantage of things like that. So that was kind of why I reached out to him.
Nice. There's one secret that I've been trying to find out for a long time. So every time I talk to a Paystack engineer, they always sound like they're enjoying life. Life is good,
Honestly.
And the retention rate for Paystack engineers is very high.
Yeah.
For a Nigerian company, for a Nigerian tech company, I don't think people last more than 2 years. But I know Paystack keeps people longer than that.
Yeah.
So
People celebrate
what's the secret
anniversaries
sauce?
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Daily. Oh, I'm so happy. Today is my 10th year at Paystack. It's crazy.
Paystack is
Wow.
not 10 years old.
No, I'm just saying.
I mean, like, I think it's I don't know, it's just a culture thing. There is a culture of like constant growth. There's a culture of transparency as well. So if you look through like Paystack's values, I was going to say our values, but well, technically I'm a stack, but if you look through Paystack's values, like they are not things that are just on the website. Like they are things that we celebrate. There are things that, so we used to have this like shout out thing, and I'm sure they still do, where you would call out people for demonstrating value. So maybe this person, insisted on high standards, or they communicated clearly. And those were just like things that when you're having a conversation with a stack, like they're like, are you embracing the mission? And like those things are like living, breathing, and amongst us. And I think generally people are just, you sort of just come and you adapt to that culture, because there's an overwhelmingly good, culture at Paystack. So it's sort of difficult to go against the grain. And if you do, you're sort of like the odd one out, right? And I think it's also a place where people genuinely care. Yeah, like a lot of people that I worked with personally, I'm still, very much in contact with. I still had lunch with my, manager like a few months ago when he came to London. And even though we don't talk every day, we sort of know that I know that I have that community of people, that I can always reach out to, that I can always speak to. So yeah, I think it's just Shola does a really good job and has done a really good job of hiring the right people who believe in the mission, and people who make sure that that mission is an everyday part of our lives as stacks. So yeah.
Stacks. Nice.
Yeah.
That's fine. Ibukun, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're so glad we had you here. We learned a lot. I'm thinking of switching careers right now because of you. But before we let you go, we always ask one final question to our superstars. That's our guests. What would you be doing if you were not in tech? I know you had great dreams to be a lawyer that didn't quite pan out. But I'm guessing if the law thing wasn't there, or you never got into tech, what would your career, what would your life, what do you think your life would be like right now?
What would I be doing? I feel like, I mean, if I go on the original thread that I did after school, maybe I'll be running a business. But I think maybe now I would do whatever job allows me to travel the most, I think is what I would do. So even if it's like travel content, I would do that. Like whatever gets me out of my regular space, more times than not, is what I would optimize for.
Do you still travel now?
I mean,
Sometimes.
yeah. I mean, when the UK, so we try to explore as much of the UK as possible. I had my parents over for summer, so obviously we were at home just like chilling with them.
That's
But
nice.
it's just unfortunate that now it's winter and everywhere you go is cold. But like, I mean, we're still doing our best with with whatever weather we get.
Okay. So what are your top 3 favorite cities so far?
Oof, okay.
You can mention Lagos, it's fine.
Okay, you know what? I've lived in 3 different countries, so I would say like the top 3. I hadn't traveled too much in Lagos, but I did enjoy like being in Abuja. So I had my camp I didn't serve there, but I had my camp in Abuja, and that was really good.
Okay.
Um, in Canada, I liked so there's this really small city called St. John. It's very picturesque. It's very I don't know. It's really good. In the UK, I haven't visited too many cities, but I visited Cornwall. Cornwall was beautiful. So it's kind of I guess when you think of St. John, you think of like hiking. When you think of Cornwall, you think of beaches. I love the beach. And then I think when you think of Abuja, I don't know if people hike in Abuja, but of course there are like mountains and stuff. It was good.
What
So I
I
would
heard
say
the
like
last time was that if you
They
hike,
stopped
you're your
hiking.
own.
Yeah. I think they stopped. They gave them warning.
like I mean it's a hiking it has potential to be like a really good hiking,
Yeah.
spot. But like I guess for the views, are still good regardless. So yeah, I would say those 3.
That's awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining us. This was very, very interesting, and I have learned a lot. I'm not like Sugar that jumps around every new role, but I might consider it in the future. So thank you so much for gracing us with
Alrighty,
this.
Ibukun. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We release new episodes every month. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you enjoy the show as much as we do, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review so the podcast reaches more people.
A huge shout out to the amazing team behind this show. This includes John Ayeni, Faith Idowu, Okechukwu Nwachukwu, and of course, your lovely host, Emmanuel and I. Connect with us on social media at Inside the Techos on Instagram and Twitter, and Inside the Techosystem on LinkedIn. Be one of the first people to get the latest news, updates, and announcements from us by subscribing to our newsletter. We promise we only share the coolest stuff. All right, see you in the next one.